What's up, Grace Point? My name is Ricky Brady, and I'm the interim music and arts director for the church. This is Sawyer, and we wanted to say welcome to every single person tuning in to the service today. Wherever you are in the world, we're here in Nashville, Tennessee at my home. You can be in another state, another country, wherever you are, just know that you are welcome here. You are included, you're celebrated, and you are loved. So thank you for joining us today. If you've not subscribed to our email list already, you can do that on our website, which is gracepoint.net/subscribe. There'll be a prompt on the screen for you to be able to do that. So anyway, it's going to be an amazing day. We're so glad you're here with us.
Welcome to Grace Point.
We are a progressive Christian church,
loving our community by gathering in our homes.
Even as we practice social distancing,
we're asking big questions about what it means to be human,
what it means to love our neighbors,
and what it means to follow Christ.
We're cultivating a safe virtual space to deconstruct or reconstruct,
to question and to grow.
We are welcoming, affirming, and fully inclusive.
Because who you are and who you love are celebrated here.
While we may be physically apart from one another,
we believe we're never truly alone.
You are never alone.
We're together in this.
We're together in this. So even though we can't give you a hug just yet,
we want you to know that you are beloved,
you are included,
and you are affirmed.
Welcome to Grace Point.
Welcome to Grace Point.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
Welcome home.
going back, I'm moving ahead, here to declare to you, my life's beginning in you. All things are made new, surrender my life to love. I'm moving forward. Whoa. Oh, Creator, with compassion in your eyes, you have given me a brand new life. I will follow and love like you do, yeah, 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 yeah. Oh, I'm not going back, I'm moving ahead, here to declare to you, my life's beginning in you. All things are made new, surrender my life to love. I'm moving, I'm not going back, I'm moving ahead, here to declare to you, my life's beginning in you. All things are made new, surrender my life to love. I'm moving forward. Yes, I'm moving forward. Whoa. Sing it. You make all things new. Yes, you make all things new, and I will follow you forward. Oh, yes, you make all things new. Yes, you make all things new, and I will follow you forward. Sing it, you make all things new. Everything is new in you. Make all things new, and I will follow you forward. You make all things new, because you make all things new, and I will follow you
Good morning, GP kids, and good morning, GP youth. I hope each of you is doing really well. I encourage you to spend time connecting with your GPYK communities this week. The GPY community connects on Discord. They hang out on Discord every Sunday from 10:30 a.m. to 11:45 a.m. For a Discord invite code, check out our Instagram at GracePointYouthTN. The Grace Point Kids community connects on Zoom. They hang out on Zoom every Sunday from 9 a.m. to 10 a.m. For more information about our Zoom hangouts, check out our Instagram at GracePointKidsTN. This week we continue our observation of Lent. Throughout the Lenten season, GPY and GPK will utilize SALT Project's curriculum, Love Builds Up. Each week, this wonderful curriculum invites our families to explore a new concept. It encourages our families to grow in our awareness and ability to care for and to love each other really well. This week, we discuss advocating for justice. What does that mean, and what does it look like for ourselves and for our communities? For information on all that is being created for and shared with our GPYK communities, check out our socials as well as your email inbox. If you're not a part of our email list, simply email me at lisa@gracepoint.net. I would love to include you. I am excited to remind you that on the morning of March 20th, our community will be hosting an outdoor, rain or shine, masked Easter egg hunt. This is a whole community event, so kids, grab your baskets, adults, grab a chair, and come to have fun and to spend time together. If you are available to volunteer, after today's gathering, check out our sign up in our GP Facebook group. I really hope you'll be there. All right, peace out, big air hugs, and so much love to each and every one of you.
Hey again. I've got a couple of announcements I wanted to highlight for you all. First of all, every Sunday morning, 10:30 a.m., we have a live chat on our YouTube channel that is available for anyone and everyone who wants to join 15 minutes before the service starts. Basically, since we're not meeting in person right now, just yet, we have that available for our community to stay connected to each other, to be engaged. Honestly, if you're new to Grace Point, you found us online, it's a really cool way to introduce yourself. We'd love to know where you're from, a little bit about you, and just be connected to what's going on in the community on a weekly basis. So please join us every Sunday morning, 10:30 a.m. on YouTube. We'd love to see you. Another thing that Grace Point offers is what we call Reconstruct. And Josh leads Reconstruct every Wednesday nights at 6:30 p.m. But we are offering a new time for Reconstruct. I know Wednesdays don't work for everyone, so we wanted to offer a second time. And that's going to start this Tuesday, March the 9th at 10 a.m. We have a new time for Reconstruct moving forward. So hopefully one of those two, Wednesdays or Tuesdays, will work for you. We'd love for you to be a part of that as well. An announcement that I wanted to give personally, like I said, I'm the music and arts director, the interim music and arts director, and I've heard from so many people who want to be involved and be engaged and connected to the music and arts. And I know that there are so many more of you out there with talents, people who can draw, people who can dance, spoken word, all of the ways to be involved in music and arts. I just want to know about it. So you can email me at ricky@gracepoint.net. ricky@gracepoint.net. Let me know your story. Let me know all the ways you'd like to be involved. We'd love to use you. We've got some really cool things coming up at Grace Point, so we'd love for you to be involved with that. And I wanted to mention March the 28th, which is a Sunday night, 6 p.m., I am hosting a Zoom call for anyone who wants to be a part of music and arts. Our technical director, Adam, he'll also be hosting with me. And so all the questions that you have regarding, I have an iPhone, can I record audio with that? Can I record video? Where do I upload my videos? All of those questions, he'll be there to answer. He's way more knowledgeable than I am about all of that. But if you are interested in joining that call and introducing yourself, it'll be a fun time. There's no pressure. It'll just be a cool time to get to know us and for us to get to know you and answer questions moving forward. If you are interested in that, just shoot me an email, like I said, ricky@gracepoint.net. Let me know so that when it's finalized, I can send out the information to you and you can be a part of it. Another really exciting thing that we have coming up is March the 14th. March the 14th at 6 p.m., which is a Sunday again. Josh will be having a discussion and we'll be hosting Pete Enns, who is a terrific author, speaker. He's done incredible work. I've read several of his books and I've listened to his podcast. It's really cool. He's a great guy. And he'll be doing like a question and answer, question and response, whatever you want to call that, for anyone who wants to join in on that. We'll be sending out details for that, but we'd love for you to mark your calendars for March the 14th at 6 p.m. So that you can hear from Pete Enns, who is awesome. So yeah, be ready for that. I want to say a special thank you to everyone who gives of their time and their finances, their resources to help support what we do at Grace Point. we appreciate and we're so grateful for everything that you do and all the ways that you support us. A couple of ways that you can give if you're interested in that. You can text the word Grace Point to 77977, or you can go to our website, which is gracepoint.net/give. And like I said, we can't do what we do without you, and so we so appreciate everything that you do to be a part of our community. I think that's it. Enjoy the rest of the service. Hey, Grace Point, I am so excited to introduce you to a beautiful, beautiful friend of mine, Grace. Hey, Grace.
Hi, Grace Point.
Awesome. So she is an artist. She's a Christian artist. She does a lot of stuff, and she goes by Similar as her artist name. Now, Grace, you were in Nashville just a little over a year ago doing shooting some stuff for your docuseries State of Grace. And I was able to be a part of that. And another Grace Pointer, Lauren Deliri, was a part of that. Tell us a little bit about what you were doing with that.
Perhaps my favorite part of that episode were my conversations with y'all. So I traveled to Nashville for the show, and we were doing an episode on inclusion in the Christian music industry. And through our research, we came into contact with you and Lauren, and we sat down and had an interview that I probably didn't realize was going to be so formative in my life at the time, but truly inspired me and I think motivated me to push the boundaries on inclusion in Christian music.
Yeah, that's so awesome. And you've recorded, like you have an album out, Preacher's Kid, which is awesome. Everybody listen to that. But that's been making some news here lately, right? Top of the Christian charts as a queer artist. What is that about? Like, how does that feel?
Very unexpected, surreal, wonderful, strange.
All of it.
Yeah. I recorded this project at home during quarantine. Basically, I started thinking about this when I got back from interviewing you and Lauren for the episode. And I kept finding myself in these communities of people wrestling with similar issues about inclusion and queerness and Christianity and finding space for us and sharing our stories. And then I just started writing Preacher's Kid. And it seems like once the process began, it was just sort of full speed ahead, and it kind of all feels like a blur. I can't believe that it's out, and I cannot believe that we reached #1 ever so briefly, but that was very, very cool.
Oh man, waking up to that, I'm sure was just crazy.
Yeah.
That's
awesome. I thought my wife was like pranking me at first. Which she wouldn't do that. She would not. That would be kind of a mean prank at that point.
That'd be crazy. There's a song on there. We actually have you a video of you singing that coming up. It's a song called Jesus from Texas, which is a great song. The whole thing is awesome. I love the album. That song specifically, tell us a little bit of kind of backstory of that song.
It was the first song that I wrote for Preacher's Kid, and I didn't know that I was writing Preacher's Kid at the time. It was just the stream of consciousness. I started writing it on the day of the election because I was thinking about how my mom, just was very unaware of social issues of her time that would greatly impact her kid down the line. And then I finished it after I went through a pretty hard situation with a very close friend of mine. And it was just, I was pouring it all out on the page. I didn't know if any of it made sense. Right. And then at the end of that, I kind of looked at this expression and I was like, I think this is the place I need to be writing from. I think it's all over the place, but at the same time, very specific to what I want to say. So it's the first song that I wrote for Preacher's Kid, and I'm really excited to play it for y'all today.
That is so awesome. Grace, Similar, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, you're going to love it. I can't wait for y'all to listen to the music. Enjoy. Thanks, Grace.
Thank you.
My mom turned 18 in the 1960s, and she doesn't remember Stonewall. To be fair, she can't know I'd be a kid at the bricks launch that police would compel me to exist. And I think about that now down the ballot of the ones I love and I don't know yet. I voted for you. Watch the sky fall as a character witness. I spent the rest of the night freaking out. I had to get high just to put myself down. But I woke up for you. And I cut my hair because I'm worth it. And these days I believe in Bigfoot more than God. 'Cause who's he hurting? I grew up a preacher's kid, cleaning up after communion. So I know that a church is not a way to live. It's a weekly reunion. My best friend found God, so we lost touch. I guess a savior beats a friend who thinks you're good enough. I hope she finds love and peace. And if her kid comes out, I hope that she calls me. Oh, what a terrible honor it's been to learn that my blessings are things you call sins. I'll spend the rest of my life tearing down the Jesus from Texas you put in a crown. But I won't give up on you.
Good morning, Grace Point. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. We are so glad you're with us, especially if you're here for the very first time. Just so thrilled you've joined us. Today is our final actual teaching in this series, What is Progressive Christianity? We have covered a lot of ground in this series and very little, to like 0% controversial in the world. And we're going to keep coming back to this from time to time. Every year we try to do a series that kind of reminds us about what it means to say that we're both progressive and Christian. So next week we'll wrap the series up and I'm going to just be responding to questions. So if you have questions, feel free to send them in, josh@gracepoint.net. GracePoint has an E on the end. And if you get those in by Thursday, I'll do my best to respond to them in the teaching time next week. So I'm really excited about that. Today, as we sort of wrap up our overview, I want to talk about the way progressive Christianity might approach eschatology. Has anybody raised your hand if you've ever heard that word before? Eschatology, it's not really a familiar word. It's kind of clunky, and it's a theological term, and it can be a little bit imposing. So let me just unpack what it means really quick. Eschatology, etymologically, it's made up of two Greek words. The first word is eschatos, which means last, and then ology, which means the study of, right? Like biology. Eschatology then is the study of last things. It's an area of conversation within theology that focuses on what some people call the end times, the ultimate fate of human beings in the world, and often it gets talked about as part of the second coming of Jesus. Now, for me growing up, this was a central, if not the central focus of our faith. I mean, we knew that we could die if we were to die tonight. That was a big question, right? We talked about that. But the equally imposing question for us was, are you ready for Jesus to come back? Like if Jesus comes back today, now, in this moment, are you ready to go with Jesus? And I've got to tell you, that didn't seem like neither option, dying tonight or going with Jesus. Neither one of those seemed safe. Neither one of those seemed like a good option. So I can remember as a kid just hoping. People kept saying, Jesus is going to come back in our lifetime. And I was going, please no, please no. I was scared of the idea. We would read the Bible and the newspaper for clues as to when the day might be. We knew we couldn't really know for sure, but we thought maybe we could get kind of close to it. We just really believed it was going to happen at any point in time. At any moment, the trumpet could sound. And as a kid, it felt like being under constant threat, impossible to relax. I felt so sure during my middle school years that Jesus would come back at the stroke of midnight on New Year's Eve. I did not understand time zones, but I just believed and so at Christmas break every year, I would try to convert as many of my friends as possible, just in case so they wouldn't be left behind. It's an area of theology that I believe, as I've continued to grow and learn, I believe it's an area of theology that is totally misunderstood, and it rests on a reading of scripture that is not contextual. What I mean is, it is the ultimate kind of theology doctrine that has cherry-picked the entire Bible, that doesn't really deal with the context. They just take random scriptures that seem to point to something that they believe is in the future that fits with the narrative, and it really isn't ultimately a way of reading the Bible, I think, that takes the Bible really, really seriously as these documents written in context, and that context matters. I love this quote from Fred Craddock, the great preacher. He said, "Many people are obsessed with the second coming of Jesus because deep down, they were really disappointed in the first one." Many people are obsessed with the second coming because deep down, even if they won't admit it, they were really, really disappointed in the first one. Is that true? I mean, since I was old enough to remember, I've heard people say things like, the first time Jesus came like a lamb, but he's coming back like a lion. Some people even lick their chops at the prospect of this idea that Jesus is coming back to settle a score. Yeah, he came the first time and we were really mean to him, and he's going to come back. And this time he's getting all that stuff about loving your enemy and praying for those who persecute, all that stuff. That stuff's out the window, and Jesus is coming back ready for a fight. Years ago, there was one pastor who infamously said, in Revelation, Jesus is a prize fighter with a tattoo down his leg and a sword in his hand and a commitment to make someone bleed. That is the guy I can worship. I cannot worship the hippie diaper halo Christ because I cannot worship a guy I can beat up. Well, here's the problem. I of course, vehemently disagree with that. And here's part of the reason why. That view says that how Jesus came into the world in the first century was in some way deficient. And now Jesus is going to come back. And when Jesus comes back, Jesus is going to be so angry, and he's going to be so violent and so vindictive that we can't. And for some Christians, this is a hopeful message. This is exciting. We've tried to be good our whole lives. Now Jesus is going to come and get revenge for everything that's ever happened. Here's the problem with that version of Jesus, this whole lion. He was the lamb and now he's the lion ready to attack. It actually doesn't pay close attention to the text. Notice this line from Revelation chapter 5. And there's a whole sort of context of they're trying to figure out who could open these seals. And we're not going to get into that this morning, but the writer of Revelation is deeply concerned that nobody's worthy to do this job. And he's weeping. Then one of the elders said to me, "Don't weep. Look, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the root of David, the descendant of David, has emerged victorious so that he could open the scroll and its 7 seals." Then, in between the throne and the 4 living creatures and among the elders, I saw a lamb standing as if it had been slain. Here's what we miss. Revelation isn't saying that Jesus was a lion or was a lamb and is going to be a lion. What Revelation is arguing is that the true lionness, I guess, is the lamb. The lion is a slain lamb. In Revelation, Jesus hasn't changed, right? What I think the writer's getting at is that his commitment to nonviolence, even in the face of his own execution, his refusal to take the way of self-preservation when the chips were down, he embodied a kind of courage that in its most awful forms, violence just can't embody. Because it doesn't take courage to pull out a sword and start hacking. I think about this from time to time when I'm in a store or a restaurant, and this happens more and more, and somebody walks in and they're carrying a gun on their hip for all to see, right? They've got a holster and they've got a gun, and they're kind of walking around with it. I never look at that and say, wow, that is a person of courage. I usually think, wow, they must be really afraid and insecure to feel the need to do that, to feel the need to carry around a weapon of death all the time for all to see. Violence, beating up your enemy, isn't courageous. It's actually the opposite. It takes great courage to be nailed to a cross. It takes great courage to pray for your executors, Father, forgive them. It takes great courage to not just match eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth. And yet we see that in Jesus. And in Jesus, the lamb that was slain, we see embodied the courage of the Lion of the tribe of Judah. And so I wanted to just sort of dispel that myth right away that Jesus is somehow the way Jesus was a mistake, and then there's violence coming at the end. I don't think that's even close to a good reading of the Bible. With all that said, when we look at the writings of the New Testament, there's a recurring theme that the eschaton, which is just a way of saying the end, eschatology, eschaton, that the end is going to happen at any moment. That seems to be what they thought. Both Paul and the early Christian community, and even in the Gospels, in their writings, it seems like they believed that during their lifetime, the end would come. So they would have said, we're living in maybe the end times. I want to read, so the first, one of the texts people draw from, it's in Mark 13, Matthew 24, it also pops up in Luke, where they think Jesus is predicting the end, what the end will be like. And so there are 37 verses, I think, to this chapter. I know that's really long, but I want to read it just as a way of giving us sort of an understanding as we keep going, where this theology comes from and sort of how it gets brought into the world. So in Mark 13, this is called the little apocalypse, because the book of Revelation is the big apocalypse. So Mark has a little apocalypse. And in Mark 13, this is during Holy Week, on Tuesday, I believe, of Holy Week. And so Jesus is moving toward his crucifixion. As Jesus came out of the temple, one of his disciples said to him, "Look, teacher, what large stones and what large buildings." Then Jesus asked him, "Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left here upon another. All will be thrown down." Now, so just to give you an understanding of these, like, the disciples are interested in how big these stones are. The Jewish historian Josephus, he records that the stones for the temple, and he was known to inflate numbers, were 68 feet long, 9 feet high, and 8 feet wide. Now, what's interesting, archaeologists have actually discovered a stone from the temple area that is 40 feet long, 10 feet high, and 14 feet wide, with an estimated weight of 500 tons. So that's just one stone. And so the disciples are marveling at this structure and how big it is and how big the stones that comprise it are. And Jesus says, "Look, I'm going to tell you something. Not one stone will be left on another. This whole thing is going to come down." When he was sitting on the Mount of Olives opposite the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked privately, "Tell us when this will be, and what will be the sign that all these things are about to be accomplished?" So Jesus is saying the temple's coming down, and they're like, "Okay, how do we know? How do we know when that's about to happen?" Jesus said to them, "Beware that no one leads you astray. Many will come in my name and say, 'I am he,' and they will lead many astray. When you hear of wars and rumors of wars, do not be alarmed. This must take place, but the end is still to come. For nation will rise against nation and kingdom against kingdom. There will be earthquakes in various places. There will be famines. This is but the beginning of the birth pangs. As for yourselves, beware, they will hand you over to councils, and you will be beaten in synagogues, and you will stand before governors and kings because of me, as a testimony to them. And the good news must be proclaimed to all nations. When they bring you to trial and hand you over, do not worry beforehand what you will say, but whatever is given you at the time, for it is not you who will speak, but the Holy Spirit. Brother will be against brother, betray brother to death, and father against child, and children will rise up against parents and have them put to death, and you will be hated by all because of my name, but the one who endures to the end will be saved." Now, just let's stop and see how we're doing right there. Right. So Jesus is saying, hey, here's how you're going to know. There's going to be wars. There are going to be all sorts of people. When he says coming in my name, think of this: people claiming to be the Christ, people claiming to be the Messiah, the ones who would be leading the people to find freedom. When you see the desolating sacrilege set up where it ought not to be, let the reader understand. That's a parenthetical comment. And this desolating sacrilege is first referenced in the book of Daniel about something that happened in the 160s. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. Then the one on the housetop must not go down and enter the house to take anything away. Let the one in the field not turn back to get a coat. Woe to those who are pregnant and those who are nursing infants in those days. Pray that it might not be in winter, for in those days there will be suffering, such as has not been seen from the beginning of the creation that God created until now. No, and never will be. And if the Lord had not cut those days short, no one would be saved, but for the sake of the elect, whom he chose, he has cut short those days. And if anyone says to you at that time, look, here's the Messiah, or look, there he is, do not believe it. False messiahs and false prophets will appear and produce signs and omens to lead astray, if possible, the very elect. But be alert, I have already told you everything. But in those days, after that suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in the heavens will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in clouds with great power and glory. Then he will send the angels and gather his elect from the four winds and from the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven. I'm going to stop right there. So Jesus is saying, here's what's going to happen. False messiahs, false Christs. There's going to be all sorts of, even it's almost as if earth itself is crying out in pain. And when that happens, Jesus says, the sign of the Son of Man coming on the clouds will be seen. And of course, this is all language from the book of Daniel. Here's what I want to say about that. I'm not going to go verse by verse and break all that down. I just want to say this. The first Christians believed they were living in the end times, and I think they were right. They believed the end would come in their lifetime, and I believe they were right, because they weren't talking about the end of the world. That wasn't really even a category for them, the end of the world, as if all this just goes away. They were talking about the end of an age, the end of the age. Listen to how Matthew phrases this exact same conversation with Jesus and his disciples. Matthew 24, when he was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately saying, tell us, when will this be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? They aren't asking about the end of the world. They're operating out of an understanding that they are living in, and to use the Hebrew terms, they are living in olam hazeh. Olam hazeh is a way of saying this world or this age. It's the thing we wake up in every day, right? It's the reality that we exist in. And they were anticipating something called olam haba. And olam haba means the world or the age to come. There are all sorts of perspectives on this among the prophets. Some saw the age to come as a time of peace and unity, a time when swords would be beaten into plowshares, a time when predator and prey would live side by side, not threatening one another, non-violently, a time when all the world would be brought up into this reign of peace and prosperity and goodness. Other prophets warned, and Jesus sort of quotes one there in Mark 13, other prophets warned that the day of the Lord would be darkness and not light, that it would be a moment of judgment because the injustice in the land was so great. And Jesus' message, I think, falls in line with this. He called for and enacted the first vision. Jesus is saying, I'm coming to make you aware of the peaceable kingdom, the inclusive kingdom, right? But it's not somewhere else. It's not anywhere else. Jesus came and said, essentially, let me give you eyes to see. See this. Repent, change your mind, begin to think differently about how we interact with one another and our enemies in the world. So Jesus called for and enacted this vision of a peaceable kingdom. But in places, and Mark 13's one of them, he warned that the opposite was possible. If they chose to follow the path of violence, Jesus warned that life as they know it would end. So this coming age, this age to come, it could be good and beautiful. It could bring unity and peace and equity to the world, or it could bring darkness and suffering and loss. And essentially Mark's Jesus in this case, is giving, so Mark wrote around the year 70. And around the year 70, here's what we know, that in the year 66, the Jews revolted against the Roman Empire. And so they actually were winning for a bit. But what we know is in the year 70, the Romans put down that rebellion. They ended it. And when they did that, they destroyed the city of Jerusalem, and they ripped down the temple block by block, stone by stone. And so the Gospel of Mark was written around either just before or just after, I lean toward just after the events of 70, where the temple has been destroyed, the city has been destroyed, life as they knew it is completely over, right? And the first Christians saw this event, the destruction of the temple, the destruction of Jerusalem. They saw this event as a vindication of Jesus's message, because Jesus called for nonviolent resistance against Rome. So think about this. As they're watching everything fall apart, the first Christians are going, if we had listened to Jesus, if we had chosen the path that would lead toward the nonviolent path, maybe, just maybe, this wouldn't have been the thing that happened. But we didn't listen to Jesus. And because we didn't listen to Jesus, now there's suffering. And while the sun wasn't blotted out, this language of the darkness and not light, I mean, it's powerful language to describe the end of the world as they knew it, the end of life, the end of an age. And so that line that says, you will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory, it's a line from the book of Daniel. And it's not to say that sometime in the future, there's going to be this event where Jesus drops down on a cloud. What it's saying is, using language from the Hebrew Bible, it's saying that Jesus was right. And that this moment is vindicating his message. Everything he warned about, the way he lived his life, the way he engaged his work and his mission, were right. That if we had listened, everything could be different. But because we didn't, we are now, those who live by the sword, Jesus said, will die by the sword. So here's what I want to say about the Bible and the end times and all of that. The Bible does not predict an end as much as it presents us with options about how we will choose to live in the world. The Bible doesn't predict the end of the world. It's essentially giving us options and telling us where those options will lead us. One of the questions people ask me sometimes is, do you believe Jesus will come back someday? And my response is pretty consistent every time. I don't think he ever left. So it's hard to come back when you haven't left. I don't think the presence of Jesus has ever been away from us. And I don't think that this is really a helpful way of understanding eschatology, the end, or how the world might end, or how the age might end for us. Because we are not passively waiting on an outside force to decide what happens to us or for us. We are active participants, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not. This is not being decided from the outside. It's being decided from the inside. You know, the poem of Robert Frost, where he gives us this great image. There are two roads that diverge into the woods, one well-worn throughout human history and one that is far less traveled. One is broad, one is narrow. One that does what comes naturally, the path of violence, the path of self-importance, the path of seeking revenge and getting even at all costs, the path of us versus them. And the other is a path that doesn't come easy. It's a path of nonviolence. It's a path of generosity. It's a path of compassion. It's a path of servanthood. It's a path, I would argue, of being truly and fully human. So in so many ways, we actually are facing an eschatological crisis on this planet. We really are. We're facing a crisis that could be end of days level crises. And I'm not talking about asteroids and volcanoes or earthquakes. Those have always existed as potential threats to human life, and at times have probably created extinction events for species on this planet. But I'm talking about human-generated threats to our shared survival as a species. And so I just want to run down a few of the things that I think, if we say, gosh, this whole way of we're just waiting around passively for somebody to return to do something, that's not the case. We're actually participating in the world. We're deciding what the next age will look like. This is this age. What is the age to come going to be? Is it going to be peace and unity and prosperity? Or is it going to be violence, death, and destruction? And I think one of the biggest threats to our shared survival is the proliferation of violence. I think violence is humanity's original sin, and one which we still haven't repented of. The United States, for example, has been in existence for 244 years. And of those years, we have been involved in a war or violence of some sort for 227 years. That means out of our entire existence as a country, we have only had 17 years free of war. And this is not a uniquely American problem. I mean, in some ways, America does it more and better than anybody else. But the reality is this is a human problem. The propensity we have to want to just kill our way to peace. This belief that if we just have bigger weapons than the other guy, then we can somehow win and create peace on earth. That's just not how it works. Right? We own more nuclear weapons than it would take to actually end all life on earth. Like, why in the world would we own so many nuclear weapons that it would kill life on earth and then have some left over? I think another potential crisis, eschatological end of the age crisis we face is the climate crisis. We are creeping toward a planetary disaster of our own making. And while lots of people have eyes to the sky looking for planet B, and I love those articles and I love reading about all these exoplanets they're discovering and maybe life could be harbored there, but here's the problem. While scientists are looking for a place for humans to go colonize if it's habitable, the problem is it really won't matter if we don't learn the lessons that have put this planet in peril. So if we go find a new planet and nobody's on it and it's ours for the taking, the reality is we're just going to damage and destroy that one too, until we learn the lessons that have put us in this place. Of course, we all know we've been living in a global pandemic. We've been languishing in this for almost a year. And many of us, me included, we've had COVID. More than 500,000 people in America have died as a result of COVID. And we are finally seeing progress. We are finally seeing many committed to following guidelines because we now have vaccines that are being distributed. And it seems like we are so close. And yet other people, Texas, are going back to normal, not caring about the human cost. The economy trumps humanity for them. And so we have lived through this pandemic, and yes, we're making progress, and I hope it's almost over. But the reality is that at some point, something else is going to come up, and we have to ask the question, can we put our sort of self-important, ego desires to just do life as normal aside when it comes time? And can we live for the common good? Because I think that is what keeps an eschatological crisis at bay. We also have increasing economic disparity in the world. And study shows that in societies like ours here in America, with large gaps between the rich and the poor, both groups are affected adversely. When the gap widens between the rich and the poor, the health of both groups are affected adversely. It's really, really fast. We are so connected that we don't even realize it. We are so deeply interconnected. Our existence depends on one another in ways we can't imagine. I think misogyny, patriarchy, homophobia, and xenophobia are also threats, eschatological threats to us. It's 2021, and we still have so far to go. And unity, ultimately, that vision of a world at peace and justice and equity and prosperity, that world is not possible until we face the very real issues of prejudice and biases that plague our world. Right? Lion cannot lie down with lamb until we actually deal with the issues that are preventing that from happening. Right? We cannot say, well, the white supremacists and then their victims lie down side by side. No. There has to be truth told about that. There has to be repentance around that. There's so much work to do. And while I long for a world of unity, we're not going to get there by ignoring the very real issues that have plagued this country since before our inception. And I'm going to say white supremacy and white Christian nationalism specifically. I mean, we know this, racism isn't new in America. It's our country's original sin. And over the past 4 or 5 years, it seems white supremacists and specifically white Christian nationalists have been violently asserting themselves because they've been getting the message that they have friends in Washington. January 6th was an all too frightening reminder that we have way, way farther to go than any of us would like to pretend. And I think all of these things present a real threat to our shared life, not just in America, but to our shared life on this planet. And I know it all sounds pretty heavy, but I actually think it's the reality of the situation. But I absolutely refuse to give in to despair. I refuse to give in to the belief that we are just doomed and there's no way to solve these issues that we face. I refuse to believe that. As a progressive Christian, I am eschatologically hopeful. Try saying that 5 times fast. I am eschatologically hopeful. Here's what that means. I do believe that a world of peace and justice is possible. I will spend the rest of my life, I hope, advocating for, working for, trying to embody that world as best I can. The solution to so many of these threats that we face is already present within us. And in the event of an asteroid, we'll just call Bruce Willis. And if you weren't around in the 90s, you probably don't get that reference. But one of the reasons I'm hopeful is because the Jesus movement began with a group of people who had very little in common. I mean, if you look at the group of Jesus' disciples, you have fishermen and tax collectors, right? You have people who were, the tax collectors had been known to overcharge the fishermen, right? The fishermen struggled to make it because of tax collectors. And Jesus has zealots, people who are advocating violent resistance, and Jesus' movement is nonviolent. And we see all of these interesting personalities come together, and they had little in common, but they came together and they lived differently. They created a different kind of community. They lived as if the kingdom was already present, because it was. Now hear this. They lived because they lived as if the kingdom were already on earth as it is in heaven, because as they lived, they were enacting it. We do not have to wait for something to fall out of the sky. We can make choices now that choose to live as if the kingdom were already here on earth as it is in heaven. Because when we live in those ways, the kingdom is already here on earth as it is in heaven. That whole, I'm not going to do anything because it's all almost over anyway, approach is self-fulfilling prophecy. I've heard it my whole life. Like there's no use to get really tied to anything because Jesus is going to come back at any moment and take us all away. Right? That do nothing because it's almost over. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And we don't have to take that approach. What if Christians decided to make the work for justice, and I'm talking economic justice, climate justice, healthcare justice, equity, what if we made that central to what it means to be Christian? Because what we've been talking about throughout so many of these sermons in this series is that there is no such thing as a gospel that isn't social. There is no such thing as good news that doesn't affect how we actually live in the world. There is no good news if it doesn't deal with hungry bellies and people who are experiencing homelessness. There is no good news if it doesn't deal with injustice and inequality and a lack of equity in the world. Gospel is always social. What if we made that central for us to what it means to be Christian, so that in our community, how we live with one another, we are already living as if the kingdom were here because it already is? What if we took seriously Jesus' call that said, seek first and foremost God's kingdom and God's righteousness? By the way, righteousness literally means justice. Seek God's kingdom, God's way of ordering the world, inclusive, expansive, generous, and pursue God's justice because God cares about justice in the world. So the question, are we living in the end times today? I was doing a little research online and I read that the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists says on the doomsday clock, you are aware of the doomsday clock that's sort of ticking down to the point of no return for humanity. They say that the doomsday clock is 100 seconds till midnight, less than 2 minutes till midnight. And of course, midnight is very, very bad. And this clock represents the reality of human generated threats to our existence. So not exterior things that might come from space or whatever, but just the things we do on this planet right now that threaten our existence. 100 seconds to midnight. We are teetering on the brink of some really bad stuff. Are we living in the end times? Only if we decide to be. We also could be living in a time of opportunity, a time of courage, and a time of resolve as we rise to meet these challenges together. These words from Martin Luther always come back to me in these discussions. He said, even if I knew that the world would go to pieces tomorrow, I would still plant my apple tree, right? Even if I knew that tomorrow the world would just go to pieces, I would still plant my apple tree today. Grace Point, in the face of all of these challenges, may we plant our apple trees, not only as individuals, but as a community. May we have such relentless hope for the future that we refuse to write off this world and this life. We refuse to write off this planet. We refuse to write off the fact that all injustice is just going to exist. We can actually, what if we begin to live right now as if the kingdom were here, because it already is? And may we engage all the real opportunities around us to change the world. May we leverage all of our creativity, all of our resources, and all of our energy to bring a better world into being. Are you with me, Grace Point? Because I believe that this is not only possible, but together with the Spirit moving us forward, it is not only possible, but it is likely, if we actually engage, that we can make a difference in this world. Amen.
I keep fighting voices in my mind that say I'm not enough. Every single lie that tells me I will never measure up. Am I more than just the sum of every high and every low? Remind me once again just who I am, because I need to know. You say I am loved when I can't feel only thing that matters now is everything you think of me. In you I find my worth, in you I find my identity. Ooh, oh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing, and you say I am strong when I think I am weak, and you say I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong, oh, you'll say I am yours, and I believe, oh, I believe what you say of me. I believe. Taking all I have and now I'm laying it at your feet. You have every failure, God, you have every victory. Ooh, oh, you say I am loved when I can't feel a thing, and you say I am strong when I think I am weak, and you say I am held when I am falling short, and when I don't belong, oh, you'll say I am yours, and I believe, oh, I believe what you say of me. I believe, oh, I believe, yes, I believe what you say of me. I believe.
Grace Point, thank you again so much for being here with us for another gathering. This is one of the highlights of the week. Don't forget, we have a Hebrew Bible study tonight. So if you're interested in digging into some of the Hebrew scriptures, and we've been talking about where they came from, and this week we're going to talk about just the first 11 chapters of Genesis, known as the prehistory. Not going to read all 11 chapters. It'll be an overview. So you can find that link on the website. We'd love for you to join us. Grace Point, I hope you have a great week as you go out and plant your apple trees in the world, as we consider how we might join our energy and resources and just opportunities together to create and to leave behind a better world. I'm so grateful for you. We love you. Grace and peace be with you.
you.